what exactly are the challenges that you have faced as fundraisers of color, making that ask, stepping into rooms, and what are you still facing?
When this idea first came about, I think, yeah, we said in the fall, I initially jumped at the opportunity because I'm glad that Ivonne said we are not experts, we're not specialists. I'm just a practitioner, because there are days where I'm merely surviving and days where I'm like, okay, I got that. I'm surviving. I'm thriving. I did that and I did it really well. And for me, what has been my most challenging experiences has been, I would say, two things. One is my voice. I'm at the table, I'm bringing my voice, and I'm being shut down, whether internally or with a donor, merely because they see me in a certain way. I've had, I would say, microaggressions and macroaggressions in the middle of asks, preparing for asks, in the middle of visits. So for me, it was, that very kind of raw experience of having that and being able to leave those experiences, come back to my desk, and how do I move forward from that, and learning how to actually react or be prepared to react in that moment. I would say on a larger scale, the issues have been specifically with me for people identifying how racism actually is embedded. It's in the structure of philanthropy. I mean, it's embedded in everything we do here in the United States. I mean, it's like a cake. I keep saying it's a cake. Philanthropy is a cake. It started it started a long time ago here, our version of philanthropy. And it's like trying to take the butter out of the recipe after the cake is already made. So trying to bring that awareness to my colleagues that are also fundraisers, that also say that they're very committed to this, bringing that awareness in those very specific moments, that has been a very big challenge of mine. That is where I've definitely been able to develop more of a voice and develop an ability to pinpoint things and have a conversation to bring it up. And once again, I'm going to say, working with Rachel, I got to experience some of those harder conversations that I had wanted to have, that I wasn't able to have, because like I said, it's in the recipe. So the challenge for me has been figuring out where it is in the recipe and bringing it out without dismantling the entire cake. Because sometimes I want to just get rid of the cake, throw it out, let's get a new cake. But we're not in a position to do that, because our organizations and the members that and the people that we serve, we need to serve them, and serving them means seeking financial support. So I'd say those are my two biggest things that have kind of caused issues for me personally, and then also within the departments that I've worked for.
Okay, I'm going to throw it to Rachel, and I don't know if Rachel will cover this, but I'd like to hear examples. So Rachel, has been beside you, so she may be able to give us more specific, you hear micro, macro, like what's happening? What's this aggression? Because some people may not realize what they are. So if Rachel, I don't know if you can kind of speak to that.
I'm laughing because I'm looking at the time, and I could talk about this for 17 years, and you don't want that to happen.
Okay.
What I will add to what Katiti is saying is, I think part of what I experience that does tie into that is this dissonance between being very hyper visible and invisible at the same time in the same room constantly. And that messes with you, and it messes with your confidence. It messes with your sense of belonging. It becomes a challenge in all the ways. To Katiti's point, just to be mindful of time and that there are other panelists, I think it's shown up in the ways that I've seen it show up in really unfortunate ways, are I think dealing with folks who don't realize that they're committed to status quo in a dangerous way. So folks who otherwise would describe themselves as white and liberal, folks who would otherwise describe themselves as being very progressive ideologically, may not realize that sometimes the transgression is in not elevating Black or people of color voices in spaces. The transgression might be in not hiring folks of color, or just hiring one person of color and asking them to be the representative and the spokesperson for all experiences. And so I think, again, making space for other panelists, sometimes it's not a massive transgression. It is truly a microaggression. Sometimes it's macro. We have to call that out too. But sometimes it's a microaggression that actually just deals with not thinking about what it looks like to invite other people into the conversation. And I think that's the most dangerous piece. If one is not thinking about that as a leader, no matter their identity, that's an issue with leadership. that's an issue with how they show up as a leader. And you have to question, are they prepared to be a leader if they don't have that perspective?
Thank you. That definitely helps. Since we're going back around, Anjali, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I would just add, a general thing which other folks have touched on is really, in my experience, just having that double standard of being asked for my opinion, being asked, from those progressive white colleagues, or even some people of color who maybe don't have an awareness that I do about, racism and what are we going to do about racism, and then being reprimanded for that or being dismissed. And just a specific example, I was at a nonprofit previously that was trying to work on these issues, went to the People's Institute training on doing institutional racism, and then basically dismissed the training and said, well, if you think it's an issue, maybe the people of color at this organization should solve it. It became about us and us being the problem, people of color, and I ended up leaving the organization as a result. So I think it's not a given that even if the organization has some sort of a social justice mission, that they're gonna care about addressing the institutional racism at the organization. And you just have to kind of decide if you're willing to put up with that, and sometimes you can't change it, and it's time to say goodbye to that place.
Thank you. Christal?
So I am currently an independent consultant, and that's intentional. I needed a break from the 9-to-5 working for someone else's workspace. I felt like I was being racially profiled at work. I know that sounds weird, but being the only Black person on staff or the only Black fundraiser, it was just assumed that anytime we had a Black client or a Black donor, that I was the person to speak to that person, right? No one else, wanted to take that on or was interested, or just assumed that because I was Black, I would be able to help them in ways that other consultants or other fundraisers could not. And that was really mind-boggling for me. And instead of really learning, well, what are the motivations for donors of color? Why do they give? Why are they engaging? Why are they getting involved? No one expressed interest in learning that. It was just that we're just going to give it to Christal. She can handle it. And so, and then yet being excluded from other conversations because I am Black, then they felt like, well, she probably don't want to talk to the, to the ritzy Bettys in Buckhead, or, to the white CEO. She probably wouldn't fit in on that conversation. And so, in some ways I felt like I was I was the token. And so I didn't know whether to feel resentful or appreciative. I didn't know what to feel. It was just frustrating. And trying to explain that to them, how I was feeling, they didn't understand. And of course, everyone was like, well, we didn't mean to offend. We didn't know what to do. We just thought you would be the right person. And so it was just a really weird mix of feelings that I was having. I've had those feelings over the years. And so I just felt like I needed a break from that so that I can kind of be in control of. And so now I have clients who are white and Black. But I'm in a space now that even with my white clients, I can be transparent with them about some things. And I think I mentioned it earlier that I was on a Zoom call with a client this week, a board and some of their staff, all of whom were Caucasian. And they were giving each other high fives about how diverse they were. And I just, I'm looking at the screen, like I'm looking at the screen at all of you all, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, okay, did I miss a brown face or a gold face? Or maybe there's someone who's Latino in the bunch who I can't, I'm just doing that. And so, I sat there for a minute, and there would be a time where I would not have said anything for fear, being fearful. And I was trying to figure out, how do I phrase this without, because I don't want to lose this client, but I just felt like I couldn't be silent. And so I just said to them, may I ask a question? How do you guys see yourselves as being diverse? Can you explain it to me? And they said, well, we're male and female, and there was like 17 men on the phone and 2 women, so that they were really diverse in gender. And we're from the North and from the South. We have folks here from Florida. We have, because they're a virtual organization, so their team is all over the country. And we have diverse backgrounds. We all have different niche. I was just like, that is not what we say, what we mean, what we say. And so I just had to explain to them. So finally, I just said, do you think you guys represent the clients that you serve? 95% of whom are African-American children in New York City. And everybody got quiet, faces got red. Everyone, it's like it never dawned on them that perhaps you should have someone from the community that you're serving that looks like that community on your board, on your staff, something. And so there was some quiet silence, uncomfortable silence, and finally, they said, well, perhaps we need to have some more conversations with that, with you about that later. And I just said, okay, that's fine. We can certainly do that. But there would have been a time where I would not have felt comfortable. It's clearly, if I had been working for someone, if I had been working in an organization, I probably would not have done that. But now that I'm my own boss, and I can kind of control my space, but I do feel like I have a responsibility to shift the culture in this for us. So I just had to be bold enough to speak my truth. So yeah, those are the kinds of examples of being in this space as an African-American woman that have been very disappointing and frustrating and just sad, actually.